Hey, well, welcome back to the M3 podcast where we talk about living your life on mission. I'm Joël here, back with Dr. Paul.
Hey.
I want to talk about something that I can tell you're already excited about when we were talking about it beforehand. I want to talk today about finding your calling.
Yeah.
One of my life verses, Ephesians 2, 8 through 10, for grace you've been saved by faith, not of yourself. It's a gift of God, not by works that no one can boast. For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which the Father prepared beforehand that we should walk in.
Yeah.
What a verse about destiny. He has a plan and a purpose for you. But I have met so many people who go, I still haven't found it.
Yeah.
And oftentimes those people are in their 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about that because I think you found your calling and I want to figure out how you did that.
Okay.
And then, but first, how would you define a calling?
You know, Joël, when I was in college, one of our chaplains at the school that I went to, he defined it as an inner abiding persuasion. And I like that. It's just a sense that this is what I'm supposed to do and it won't go away. It's not here today and gone tomorrow. It's settled in your spirit. I think it's also a sense of purpose and destiny, a sense of this is why I was put on this earth. This is what gives me soul satisfaction when I do it. I think of that quote from Liddell.
The runner, right?
Yeah.
And missionary.
When I run, I feel the pleasure of God. And I think your calling is when you do it, you feel God's pleasure.
That's that story about Eric Liddell. Wasn't it when his sister was like, why are you doing this?
Exactly.
When you could be going on the missions. And he's like, but there's something in the running that God has placed in me that I need to pursue.
God has made me fast.
Yes.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that. Because I grew up, I don't even think my dad taught me this, but somehow along the way, I got this idea that when you pursue your calling, it should be something that involves a lot of suffering and misery, which I think there's an element of that. I think sometimes when you feel a calling, it can feel like a burden.
Yeah.
But do you think it has to be a miserable and suffering thing?
I see it just the opposite, honestly. I mean, I think there are challenges to it, but I think there's a supernatural grace to do what you're called to do. I think Jesus said his yoke is easy and his burden's light. And so I have never found, what we do is hard, but I don't feel it is something that makes me miserable.
How would you define your calling? Yours specifically?
I think, we talked about this a few minutes ago in between, but I think a calling can be at different seasons, different things for different seasons. But I just remember when I was a kid, Joël, my mom was a nurse and is a nurse, and when I put her bandage scissors in my hands, I knew that was what I was supposed to do. And so as an 8-year-old kid putting those bandage scissors, I knew that was what I was supposed to do. And so I just, like a laser focus, I had my target on going to medical school and becoming a doctor. And so taking care of people and being the hands and feet of Jesus to people in need, to me, that's my calling. And I still do that, whether it's pastoral work here at Lakewood or whether it's doing mission work overseas.
That's really interesting because I've actually talked to a lot of people that they say that. Like I knew when I was 7, I have a buddy who his father helped design the 777 aircraft.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
And he decided, I'm going to fly that plane when I grow up. Yeah. And he literally set his sights on that and he never stopped.
Yeah.
And he's flying 777s now. And I thought, well, that's interesting because that's my total opposite experience. Yeah. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I feel like I kind of did a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And we were joking about that earlier. Like, here I am today, whatever it is I do, God's found a way to use all those different things.
Yeah.
But I think I found for me, I would define my calling really as helping people conquer their mountains and achieve the full potential God has placed in them. And I realize everything I do, the outdoor adventures I lead, the mission teams I lead, the writing I do, this kind of stuff, I'm always focused on how do you really become that complete that work that he placed within you. Yeah. But it's really interesting how in different seasons of life, it's looked very different. So what has your calling looked like in several, do you have any examples of different seasons where it looked completely different?
Well, I think, early on is totally focused on just taking care of people in surgery. But then there was a season, and even now, doing pastoral work, it's a totally different, it's not totally different, but it's a different nuanced calling. Yeah. You're still taking care of people, but it's in the pastoral role now. So I think those were the two big, callings of my life.
So that makes me think of something because I know you doctors go through a lot of schooling. And if you don't know your why, I can see it would be very easy to drop out of that. Because the pressure that is on you guys in school. So what have you found is helpful for people that are in the throes of that learning, and they're saying, I'm not in my calling yet, I'm training for my calling, and I'm getting kind of burnout in the training?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you mean in medicine specifically?
Medicine, and we'll span it out. But yeah, specifically medicine, I would say, yeah.
Yeah, I would, well, compassion fatigue, burnout, very high levels in medicine right now. It's a very difficult field to practice or field to be in right now. But, I don't have the answers for all of that, but I just know taking care of yourself is really important. And that's not just taking care of yourself spiritually, although that is very important. You have to take care of yourself emotionally. You have to take care of yourself physically. You have to set boundaries. That's very difficult to do. I remember I was suffering from some compassion fatigue and burnout when I was practicing surgery. Part of it was a spiritual change that was coming, but I had to draw some significant boundaries in my life. And before Joël, there's 3 of us that practiced together, and we just all pooled the money and distributed, and everybody worked as hard as they could. But I had to go to my partners and said, I just don't want to work this hard anymore. I don't want to take call every night. I don't want to. And I had to draw some strict boundaries. And I tell people that I never had any balance in my life until I had the ability to say no. And saying no was one of the hardest things that I'd ever done.
What if you feel like you can't say no? For example, say you're in the early phases of your medical training and they're like, no, you don't get to say no or you're out of the program.
Yeah.
How can you stay focused on the calling? Like, what's a good way to, because I know a lot of times, again, I'm not a doctor, nor do I play one on TV.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing there's a lot of times you're not directly interacting with patients early on in the process, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say the first thing to do is just keep your eye on the ball. What do you want to do? And is it worth the price that you're having to pay to do it? And then a very practical thing that I did, and I taught my kids this, is I can do anything for a month. And I divided 5 years into just 1 month bites. And, you take call every other night at Children's Hospital for a month, and I can do it another month, and I can do it another month. And pretty soon it's a different rotation. And then, what I found is when you just depend on God for that season, that time, He gives you grace for the next one. And before I knew it, 5 years was over.
That makes me think of that verse where Jesus essentially said, live in day-tight compartments.
Exactly.
He basically said, today has enough trouble of its own. Stay focused on today. Tomorrow will take care of itself.
Exactly.
So you do your best to serve God and stay focused on your why today. And then that turns into a week, a month.
Yeah.
And so on this idea of finding your calling, do you think, I know a lot of people, they say, I'm working this job, but it's not my calling.
Yeah.
How do you know if the job isn't your calling?
Yeah.
Have you ever had an experience where you were in a job and you go, this is definitely not my calling?
Oh, yeah. I mean, several jobs I had in between in summers, like working construction and doing waiting tables and things like that. I knew that wasn't my ultimate calling, but I think there's a real balance there. I think you have to be faithful with where you're at. And I tell people all the time, God calls us out of activity and He calls us out of faithfulness. And so I think showing yourself faithful at a job you may not be your calling, will put you in a situation for God to call you to what He wants you to do.
I've told people that a lot of times. They say, I'm trying to find my calling, and I tell them oftentimes, if you'll get involved in serving wherever you can find to serve, and it may be in an area that you do it for a couple months and you go, definitely not my calling.
Exactly.
But it leads you to something else.
Exactly.
And then it leads you to something else. That's been my story. I didn't know at 8 years old that I wanted to be whatever I am today. But I kind of stumbled my way in. And as I look back, life is lived forward, but understood looking backwards.
Exactly.
I kind of like, oh, wow, God was leading me through all that bumbling and stumbling, which is, I think, encouraging for a lot of people who are in maybe their 50s and they're going, did I waste my life not finding my calling?
Yeah.
What would you say to somebody like in that can you, if you're trying to find what you're supposed to do, can you be wasting your life just because you don't feel like you found your calling?
No, I think God works it all together. It's like that needle point on one side, it looks terrible, but on the other side, it's beautiful. But, a couple thoughts I had, Joel, and I wrote them down. You can't be selfish and happy. And somebody he made this statement, selfishness is the key to misery. And I say that to say, I don't think you can live a selfish life and find your calling. I think you have to live an unselfish life. And I like what Rick Warren, I don't know if you remember way back, the S.H.A.P.E model. Remember that?
I don't know.
It's how to find your calling. Number one, your S.H.A.P.E, it's an acronym. S.H.A.P.E is, what are your spiritual gifts? I mean, what has God gifted you to do? Like, for instance, I have some friends who are just gifted at business, but they're also gifted as in generosity. And they're using their enormous ability to make money to make an enormous impact for the kingdom with their money, with their generosity. So find your S.H.A.P.E, your gifts, your spiritual gifts. The H is for heart. What are you passionate about? I love kids, but I'm not passionate about kids ministry. But I have other friends that are absolutely passionate about kids ministry. A is, what are your abilities? What can you do well? The P is personality. What's your personality? And E is experience. Experience is a lot what you talked about. I've tried this. I've done this. I've done that. I've done this. What of your experiences? What resonated with you? What made sense to you? So I think that's a real good kind of paradigm to think about finding your calling.
Is that from a book? What's that
it's
from?
It's called your Purpose-Driven Life by Rick Warren.
Was it in Purpose-Driven Life?
I think it was there.
It's been a while since I've read that, but yeah.
But it's
okay.
S.H.A.P.E, and you actually can get online and you can take the test, and it can kind of help you define where you should think about.
That's what I think that's really interesting. How you say what kind of catches your attention, because it's interesting that we don't get to pick what's interesting to us. I've tried to get interested in certain things. People are like, "This is the coolest thing ever," and I try and get interested. I'm like, it's just not. I'm not interested in it. But yet, I also find people that are like, I'm interested in some weird things. But I've seen God use those really weird things. Yeah. Now, you may be one of those people that you're still waiting for your moment in history to come for that weird thing. Yeah. But if you can stay focused on recognizing that, if that's something that God has placed in your heart, I love that verse that says, delight yourself in the Lord. Yeah, He'll give you the desires of your heart.
Exactly.
And I don't think that means you can just wish for a Maserati and He'll give you the desires. Yeah. I think it means that He has placed desires in you, and He's going to give you those desires that He placed in you. Yeah. And that's where fulfillment is going to come from, and purpose.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking about just put yourself in a situation. You may have a vocational job where you really can't do this, but find some place you can live an unselfish life. Maybe with your family, it may be with your church volunteering, it may be find a way that you can live an unselfish life. The other thing I was going to mention, you ask about, can you find your purpose at 50? There's a great book, and we may have referenced this before. It's called Halftime by Bob Buford. Yeah. If you've not read that, it's a really great read. But the premise of the book is it doesn't matter how you play the first half like a football game. You win or lose by how you play in the second half. Mm-hmm. And that should encourage men and women that are still searching. They feel like they're still searching, because you can still win in the second half of your life. Whether you feel like you've made a difference the first half, the second half, you can make a difference in your life as you find God's calling for your life.
That is encouraging. I remember reading a book. It's kind of not exactly an exciting book, but it was called Old Masters and Young Geniuses. And it was basically him analyzing these great works of art. Mm-hmm. And the works of art that we consider the greatest, the longest lasting, were actually done by artists in the second half of their life. And you see that they painted a layer when they do these spectrograph things. They painted a layer, and then they tweak the layer a little bit, and they tweak the layer and tweak it. And as you look, you see these layers upon layers of work they did.
Yeah.
And what we call the masterpiece was actually them tweaking over and over. The Mona Lisa has layers of not quite right on it. I think that's super encouraging, because
beautiful.
The guy we call, Leonardo the Great, he probably even looked at it and said, well, it's not quite there yet. Yeah. But yet we saw it, the work he had done. And he says that it's really rare that people hit it early in life. Yeah. Most of the people, the greatest thing they do is kind of after a bunch of stumbling around, and they find their calling. But it's because everything's built on previous experience. I mean, even though that's really what's happened with you now. It's wild how God took you, He got you the medical training, took you out of it for a while, and then put you right back into it.
Exactly.
But you've now connected the church. I mean, what a powerful resource having the church, and even the M3 conference. Yeah. What's come from that is all of those pieces God put together, just kind of one layer after another, right?
Yeah, I was thinking of this story when you were saying that. I was walking home. I was working in Africa, and I was walking home late one night, I think 4 a.m. actually, from doing a C-section. And it was just beautiful. You could see the Milky Way in the southern hemisphere there, and it was cool weather, and it was just beautiful. And I had this overwhelming thought as I walked through the darkness. I wouldn't trade this for anything else in my life. What I mean by that, being in God's will, doing what you feel like you're called to do. There's a satisfaction about that, that really is, what's the good word, breathtaking.
Amen. I totally agree with that. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us for this conversation today. And we just want to remind you, wherever you are right now, whatever God has you working on in this season of life, you are here for a purpose. He has a plan for your life. So stay focused on living your life on mission and serving Him.